Welcoming you back to another edition of the Edge Podcast. Managing editor Brenden Slaughter, joined as always by my recruiting analyst Jared Halus here for BeaversEdge.com. Well, Oregon State, Stanford coming up here real soon, right around the corner. We're recording this podcast on a Thursday. Beavers set to take on the Cardinals Saturday night. Another late Pac-12 after dark matchup. I know all the Beaver fans are looking forward to another round of night game at Reser Stadium and another home game, thanks to Stanford not being able to play in their own homes. So that's another plus for Oregon State. We'll break down that game as we kind of get towards the end of the podcast. But just to kind of recap, Jared and I haven't talked to you guys since Oregon State fell to Utah this last weekend. Jared, just right off the bat, what were some of your takeaways from that game? I know for a fact that the way Chance Nolan played was not what you and I expected.
Yeah, no, it was a gritty performance. You have to love the fight that the team showed. While there was a lot of times where they probably could have bowed out and just said this is out of reach, but it's a thing. The team continued to battle it out and try to claw their way back into a game after being in a pretty big deficit. So you like to see that. You touched on Chance. He showed some flashes, but certainly showed some flashes of things that needed to be improved as well. So some stuff to work on there. Looking forward to seeing how it's all brushed up and fixed heading into this game.
Certainly, and you hit the nail kind of right on the head there. And the way I describe that game to Oregon State is the second that they knew, and again, I think it's upon further review, I think it's quite interesting that they knew Jamar Jefferson probably wasn't going to play on Tuesday and managed to sit on that information all the way until Saturday. Credit for having tight lips there, loose lips sink ships. So Oregon State definitely kept everyone in the dark there. But if it wasn't bad enough having your arm tied behind your back, not having Jamar Jefferson, then you had your backup quarterback. And then they tied your other arm behind your back and took out, your best backup running back, and you were on to your third string running back in real quick order. My point in all that is all considering, I think the end result was what the end result was, but you got to give credit to the team. They fought, they clawed, they were right there. And I get it, right? Jonathan Smith said after the game, he felt they could have played better, and they could have. But when you consider the circumstances, Utah, as we talked about, was extremely desperate for a win. And, they made it really tough on Oregon State's offense throughout the whole day.
Yeah, they definitely were, seemingly the more motivated team coming into it. We kind of questioned which team would end up looking that way. And, I think Utah came out with a little fire, and that's how they were able to get the lead that they did. Ultimately, it was just a little too much to come back from. Again, like you said, there's a lot of things that went into the game for Oregon State that really downplayed their chances of winning the game.
Yep.
So I think, given all the circumstances, they were able to make it a competition, which is all you can ask for.
Certainly. And, just when you're kind of looking at that game and, there were missed opportunities, right? Whether it was, Nashawn Wright dropping in a would-be interception, Hamako Bashir dropped a would-be interception at a time, Tegan Quatoriano dropped a would-be touchdown early in the game too. So, Jonathan, everyone this whole week has been saying it's all about the missed opportunities. And when you look at it, breaking it down, you just see Oregon State just left too much cheddar out there. And, that's why they weren't able to get the win. But with that being said, though, life moves on. There's more football games to be played. And in the case of Oregon State, Jonathan Smith announced on Monday, Tristan Gebbia out for the year, gone. He's done, had surgery on his injured hamstring. He'll be back and ready to go next year. We're not sure if he'll be ready by spring ball or not, still to be determined. But once you got that news, you're like, okay, there's, no one's going to feel sorry for you. Chance Nolan's got to get ready to go. He's got 1, 2, or, potentially 3, I guess, since a bowl game's still not out of the question yet, games to be able to kind of have his audition. And I say audition because, Jared, you and I will get into this and kind of this discussion, but at this point, can you tell me that quarterback competition in spring will not be wide open?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, obviously, there's now another piece to the puzzle with Sam coming in early.
Yep.
It's going to be super interesting. I think similarly to last season, you kind of will have to give Tristan a bit of an edge.
Yep.
Just based on everything that we've seen at this point, unless Chance lights it up, which he can very well do. But coming into last season's spring practice, there was kind of a vibe that Tristan was going to be the guy, it ended up being that way. I think that will probably be the same thing that happens this year. Maybe not. I'm not saying that he's got the job on lock, but he'll probably have a little bit of an edge. But as far as competition goes, man, I mean, what more could you ask for?
Well, and I think just like, Jared, just compared to like, you weren't quite, you said you weren't with Edge when, it was the real rough days of the quarterback position under Gary Anderson when the depth was not there. But you remember long enough to know that when the Beavers were trotting out, Connor Blount and some other guys, and the depth necessarily wasn't there, right? You lost your starter, and then, oh boy, here's this guy who, maybe had been over his head. Next year, you're going to have a quarterback room that has one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the conference as far as like years and being in a system in Tristan Gebbia, a really good looking rising redshirt redshirt freshman. Gobranson a redshirt this year. Coming in as well as Ben Gobranson will be in the mix. You talk about Sam Vidlak, really, really under the radar guy beyond just the Oregon State circles. I mean, obviously everyone in Oregon State circles knows what Sam's all about, but I still think he's going to surprise some people when he gets here too. And then you toss in Chance Nolan, who, oh, by the way, was just a 4-star recruit last year. So, it's the depth and talent in that room. It's all got a lot of moving pieces and stuff to be determined. But big picture from this conversation, the quarterback depth, for those that have been worried about it in previous cycles, it looks to be set up quite well for the foreseeable future now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and they're continuing. They've already gotten, some great relationships built for the 2022 class. So I don't think that will slow down. Having a former quarterback as your head coach certainly helps with quarterback recruiting. So I think you're kind of starting to see that pay off already, like you were just talking about. I mean, I don't think that will change as long as Jonathan Smith's the head coach at Oregon State.
Yeah, and not to mention Brian Lindgren in his own right was, a pretty good quarterback too, and I believe he has some state records somewhere. I mean, he was pretty solid QB too, and then obviously Jonathan. So you kind of got the QB tandem,
Exactly.
being able to go on that recruiting trail. And just in your opinion, Jared, what do you think? What do you think that says that Jonathan can say, "Hey, I quarterbacked here," and even Brian Lindgren has a pretty good background in being able to, show what he did at the college level too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It certainly helps. I mean, for a guy like Sam, if you saw our story yesterday on Beaver's Edge, that's a big thing for him. And there's just so much knowledge there. So it's absolutely something that, these quarterbacks are going to see. And like I said, you're seeing it pay off already, and I don't think that will change.
And just go ahead and moving along to our next topic here. Obviously, the biggest news of yesterday, Jamar Jefferson cleared to play against Stanford this weekend. Jonathan Smith told John Canzano on the Baldface Truth on Wednesday that he returned to practice and he will be he is cleared. He didn't say for certainty that he will play. We're looking to confirm that with Jonathan today. As we mentioned, we're recording this on a Thursday. But as far as just the extremely likelihood that he'll be back now that he's back at practice, and John McCartan and Ruwaya Miyagi also returned from that as well. You can't even measure it, Jared. I mean, saying it's huge to have him back doesn't even do it justice. Like, Beaver fans, interpret it as you may, enormous, huge, whatever adjective or verb you want.
Yeah, no, it's certainly big, man. Jamar's a heck of a player, and you saw in the rushing attack last week that it just wasn't working out.
No.
So bringing him back, man, it's exciting, and it brings the offense to a whole new level. It can open up the read option a lot for Chance as well, because there's a real threat if he does decide to hand the ball off instead of pull. So it's really going to open some things up, and I think this week will be, like we said about Tristan a couple weeks ago. I think before the Oregon game, you kind of got to give him a couple weeks. I don't think anybody's writing Chance off at this point,
No.
but they're skeptics now, and so he's got something to prove. And so this week, and if there is another game, will be a good time for him to prove that.
Certainly, and just talking a little bit about that game itself and Chance. Last point on him before we start to move over to Stanford, but Jared, we've seen some questions from the subscribers on the damn board this week, and even just me as a football fan, you'd be pretty hard not to notice that play 4th and 1 where Oregon State was down 6 and had a position to score and win the game. And if Chance Nolan had kept the ball on the read zone, he'd still be walking to the end zone all these many weeks later. And after the game, Jonathan Smith said, Chance Nolan, that was a designed RPO. He had the option to pull if he wanted to. And even Coach Lindgren told us that as well. I guess, Jared, how does a game like that sit with you? Obviously, Chance Nolan, this whole week has been saying he knows he can be better. You wrote a story on him. I wrote a story on him. We know the talent's there. I just think that was maybe the worst kind of a situation you could throw a first time starter into on the road. I mean, add fans into the mix and it would have been worse. But, on the road playing a really, really good Utah team. I mean, a Utah team that just hangs their hat on defense year in, year out. No Jamar Jefferson, no BJ Baylor. And, how much chemistry did you really have developed with those receivers? And I think as evidenced by him working mostly with Zariah Beeson, that's the guy he's got the most chemistry with.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be really interesting. But just my question for you is, how do you move on from that, knowing that you could have won your team that game if you'd pulled the ball there?
Well, Utah, like you said, is such a disciplined team, and so for plays like that with RPOs, I mean, they're gonna sit and they're gonna get the right read most of the time, just because that's how disciplined they're taught to be.
Yep.
So that it's a tough first game, absolutely, like you said. But moving on, I actually your question reminded me of something. Georgia Tech used to have a quarterback named Taquan Marshall. His very first game against Tennessee was in 2017, and he had a Heisman vote after his first game against Tennessee. Absolutely lit it up. But Taquan was obviously a great player throughout the rest of his career, but I'm not sure we ever saw that Taquan ever again. It's a first game thing, For some people, it's different than others. We saw it last year with Tristan. He had a really good game against Oregon, and then the first couple games of this season were like who's this? This is not who we saw last year. So for Chance, he's got a better opportunity because the bar that he and again, this is no disrespect for Chance at all, but like you said, he knows he has improvements to make. So if he can come and make those improvements, then it's all the more power to him. Whereas with other players like Tristan and like the example I just gave, you set the bar so high, and then anything else that you do is like, well, why can't you do it like you did the first game? So Chance has advantage of that, right? There's not, there's pressure because he knows he has to get better, but he's not coming and telling himself like, if I don't drop 500 yards total offense next week, everybody's gonna be disappointed. So it's all. I think it's mostly a mindset thing. The coaching's definitely there. Like we said, the talent's there. It's just a matter of getting in the correct headspace, flushing the mistakes that you made and learning from them throughout this week, and really diving in and making it happen.
Couldn't agree more. And last topic I want to get to just before we kind of really kind of briefly preview the game. Oregon State's defense. I wrote about it this week. One of the most Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situations with this defense is they can't seem to come out firing right off the bat. Oregon State's defense, whether it be against Utah, Oregon, Cal, whoever it had been, they've been better in second halves. There's another Washington State better in the second half. But for whatever reason, there's just something about the early parts of games. I mean, I think back this last weekend, despite Oregon State's defense playing well and holding them to those field goals, Utah marched down the field with relative ease. They were able to stiffen in the red zone and, keep the game in tow. But, I remember tweeting at the moment, it could have been 21-0 very, very easily. And, that's just kind of the thing that the team, and particularly the defensive coaches, have been just trying to get their thumb on, for weeks is why are they not starting games super fast? And, that's putting them behind the eight ball. And, that for me is what I'd be looking to see from the defense this weekend, because as I said in my story, I think they've shown modest improvements from where they were last year. And heck, they're oceans further than where they were in 2018, let me tell you. But, as far as this year goes, I think that's kind of the thing. And we heard from Tim Tibesar say we still haven't seen a complete game. I feel like I've been hearing that narrative of a complete game from this coaching staff, the previous coaching staff. So maybe it's just a little tougher to put together a complete game on both sides of the ball at Oregon State. But nevertheless,
Oh,
I'm curious
heard it
from
a
your,
lot.
or go ahead, Jared.
No, I was just saying that's a that I hear as well from multiple programs. I don't think it's really necessarily just an Oregon State thing, and I don't think that's what you're getting at. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty common. There's a lot of teams, and especially like you said, this season. I don't think we have seen it. I mean, of course, you probably point at Oregon that game for one that they probably played completely the most.
But
But
even
there were
then,
still opportunities there.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that
even then
game
they
could have been
spotted Oregon a fair amount of points and had to come back, as we both know. So, I
right,
mean,
right.
you and I know the players on this defense. We know exactly what they have. We know the talent that they have. It's a lot better than what it was last year and the year before, particularly. Man, Avery Roberts, man, that guy's a man amongst boys out there leading the Pac-12 in tackles. He is a monster on the field, and I think he's been a really, really, really awesome addition just for the real tightness of not letting those big explosive plays happen. The nice thing is unlike previous years where at least once a game, it would be assumed that the Oregon State defense would give up a massive explosive play. Those have kind of dwindled a little bit. So that's been, progress. And, you talk about small steps, but Jared, against a team like Stanford, that's probably not going to run up the scoreboard on you anyway, just with the way that they play, controlling the clock, being, Stanford-esque, 3 tight ends, a fullback, maybe an extra offensive lineman. How important will it be to maybe, stop Stanford on a couple early drives just to kind of get that momentum going?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's something that we haven't really seen. I mean, there's been third down stops and first possession stops and everything, but if they could really shut them down, maybe like what was it, the Cal game last year? They hopped out to a 21-0 start like right away
Yeah,
with UCLA, one of the California teams.
yeah, big
But
time.
something like that, I would love to see something like that. And I mean, at that point in that game, I think it was only 5 minutes in they had 21 points. But yeah, it would be super inspiring for the team, I think, to do that. And they're a dangerous squad. They've just got to put the pieces together, like Coach Tibbs was saying, and like everybody's been saying.
Certainly. And just to kind of start to wrap up this edition of the podcast, again, make sure to keep it locked to beaversedge.com as Jared and I we're within a week of signing day. It's obviously going to be a little bit different this year, being in the midst of, a season. The Beavers will still be playing a football game that weekend. To be determined exactly on how the coaches and everything are going to be doing press conferences and talking about guys. And, I was kind of, it's different because usually you don't see coaches talking about their recruits while while the game is still going on. So
Yeah,
that part's going to be a little unique to me, but I expect Jonathan Smith will speak. And, the really unique thing for us, Jared, and for the Beavers as a whole is the size of this class. Just kind of update us. Where are we right now? And are you expecting any big surprises down the stretch?
yeah. It's like you said, super small class, but it's not at fault of anybody. This was the plan all along. You could see it happening this way, you know, since the beginning of the year, even before the beginning of the year. That you could just tell that there wasn't going to be 15 plus people in this class like we've seen the years prior. And
Right.
again, that's all the plan, especially in this weird year where we don't know who's coming back and who's not, since everybody got an extra year. You don't want to take a gamble on scholarships. But there's not many graduating seniors anyways. So, it was something where the class was always going to be smaller. They really went out and found guys that they needed to get, and they filled the positions they need. I know there's a lot of rumbles about we need more offensive linemen and we need more defensive linemen. I think those are going to come, but as of now, I think they're pretty content with the guys they have, and rightfully so. We've said this before on the podcast. It's a small class, but everybody's dangerous. So I think that they really address their needs well. And obviously, as far as the offensive line and defensive line goes, I think that if they feel there's a need there, which I'm sure they do, then they'll do whatever measures necessary to fill those gaps.
Defensive line, I'd agree with you, and I would tell every single Oregon State Edge subscriber the same thing that I've been typing in print for the last, basically since Jim Mahalchek was hired. I'll never worry about the Oregon State offensive line as long as Coach Mahalchek
Yeah.
is there, because maybe you're not getting the most marquee guys, but by the time they're ready to start and play in his system, they're good to go. I mean, you look at this last weekend, a guy like Keely Montalban, right? Struggled with injuries, hasn't played a ton throughout his career. Oh, he just casually stepped in for Noose and did well both games. You couldn't even hardly tell when Noose Kiabunum was, out for COVID-19 tracing protocols. So the defensive line, I'll give you that, because I don't think the Beavers as a unit have proven really anything with consistency since Jonathan Smith has arrived at that position group. On the flip side, Jim Mihalchek and that group, they have proved what they can do, and I'm confident in them. But one thing that I mentioned,
though, I mean, you have to resort back to last year's class, which was, in my opinion, fantastic. They got some really, really good guys in last year's class. They've got Henry and Sione Vecoso in this one. So I mean, well, maybe interesting to see what happens there, but it's a good class still. And like we said, everybody, it's a small class, but it's dangerous. And to me, I would rather them, especially for defensive linemen. You've got Omarion Fa'amoe. He's a great player.
yep,
If they need to find another one, I trust that they will. It's not about getting 4 guys in the class or
I
5 or
agree.
however many, but it's
And
more
this
of
coaching
the
staff has
quality of
shown the
it.
ability to go to the transfer portal if needed. I mean, it
Right,
obviously didn't work out with
right.
Charles Moore, but that was an example of them dipping into the transfer portal to pick up a high impact guy. And just as I mentioned to you when we were talking about the size of this class, if I was Beaver fans, I would look at this kind of small number, not likely going to add any more, with a grain of good and bad. It's like, sure, maybe you're not getting, a couple more guys, but that led me to believe there are some redshirt seniors or true seniors that have indicated they want to come back. And you can't buy experience in college football. So for me, I'd take the redshirt seniors or seniors that wanted to come back over a ninth or 10th guy in the addition. That's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. I mean, of course, that's not confirmed or anything, but it certainly is a good possibility.
Yeah.
Uh, there's some guys with stuff to prove still, and I mean, they very well could come back. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to get people just to get them. Scholarships aren't a dime a dozen, so you want to make sure that you're being selective, and Oregon State's done a good job of that, especially when you're talking running backs, quarterbacks, things like that. I think it's okay for people to question the recruiting on the lines in the trenches so far.
Yeah.
But what you can't question is, like you were saying, what happens to the players when they do arrive. So you got to have faith in the coaching staff. I mean, that's all it comes down to. Truly, they get paid the big bucks for a reason. They're in the positions that they're in for a reason. So they know better than anybody else does. Myself, anybody. I mean, heck, it does not matter who. They know better. So you just got to trust them, and I trust. I mean, I think they've got a plan in place, and they'll see it through.
Certainly. And again, make sure to keep it locked to beaversedge.com. We are going to have full breakdown of recruiting signing day next Wednesday. Excuse me, getting my days mixed up here. That'll be next Wednesday. We'll have complete coverage, beaversedge.com. You don't want to miss it. Just to kind of wrap up the podcast now, Jared, are the Beavers going to chop down the tree this weekend? Is Stanford going down in Reser Stadium? What's kind of your gut right now as far as which way you're leaning? Obviously, we're not going to spoil it now. Check out staff predictions tomorrow or Friday morning as we will have that whole thing broken down. Right now, Stanford comes in, I believe, last time I checked the line, as a very small favorite, 2-3 points. I think this is going to be a really nip and tuck game with who's ever able to control the time possession and play their style of game. Right now, I like Oregon State. I want to sleep on it and write my prediction later this evening. But right now, I still like Oregon State. How about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, and I hate to sound like a homer because I've picked Oregon State a lot this year, but I mean, if the Oregon game didn't prove it to you, they're very obviously a team that can hang with anybody.
Yep.
And I mean, I think Utah is probably a little better than Stanford, and they were missing a lot of pieces in that game. One massive piece, the biggest piece to the offense, the biggest piece to the team, is returning this week. So there's some more things going for them this week. So I'm in the same boat. I like Oregon State, but I want to give it a little more thought. Maybe look a little bit deeper at Stanford. But as for now, I think at the minimum, this is going to be another super close game. Another one where I'll probably be up until 2:30 in the morning of it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, certainly, Jared. Those Pac-12 after dark games are more like Pac-12 mid-morning games for those of you on the East Coast. But nevertheless, it's going to be exciting. We'll have complete coverage here at beaversedge.com. Obviously, stay with us step by step here. We're in a really, really busy time right now. It's go time. We got signing day coming up. We got football. both basketball programs are really starting to get in the mix of things. We'll be jumping on and giving a lot more attention to them here in the coming weeks as well, once, everything starts to flip towards hoops. So lots of exciting times coming up, lots of exciting things going on, and most notably right ahead and right in front of us, a matchup with the Stanford Cardinal at Reser Stadium, 7:30 on Saturday night. So should be an exciting game. Make sure to stay with Jared Halus and myself for updates throughout that. And make sure to also check out all of our pregame content. We're going to have staff predictions. Jared will have his starters recruit story. We'll have the injury report and so on and so forth. So we really appreciate you guys checking out this edition of the podcast. We'll be back next week. For Jared Halus, I'm Brenden Slaughter signing off in this edition of the Edge Podcast.